Well, thanks for having me on, Beth. Look, it's never really a single thing. The conflict in the Middle East has been, of course, going on for decades, but the factors that precipitated the most recent round of violence was the death of a Palestinian prisoner who was on hunger strike for 87 days. Adnan died, which resulted in a number of protests all throughout Gaza, which then led to a number of rockets being fired into Israel. Israel has since responded with a number of operations that, as you say, have killed Islamic Jihad militants as well as a number of civilians.
And this is the thing, the Defence Forces have been highly criticised for the civilian death toll in these militant strikes, maybe, 20 civilian casualties as part of this latest campaign. Can they be more targeted? Can they be more specific?
Look, every civilian death is, of course, a tragedy. Can they be more targeted? Gaza is one of the most densely populated places on Earth. It's just really difficult, which is precisely why we need a halt to the violence immediately. There can't be any exchange between rockets and tactical operations. This is leading to unnecessary deaths. And I'm glad to see that Minister Wong has spoken out calling for a halt to the violence. And I certainly hope that others will do the same and both governments will hear this.
Yeah. Do you think, Michael, that the far right component of this current coalition government in Israel is playing a part into this current campaign? Are they urging Benjamin Netanyahu to carry out what he is he has said is going to be sort of all-out war against these militants?
Unfortunately, I certainly do. There was reports that the ceasefire was holding and that the Israeli government was not going to return fire after Islamic Jihad fired rockets. However, National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir, this is a convicted felon who is so extreme that he was actually refused the right to serve, which is compulsory to serve militarily in Israel. He then threatened to boycott the coalition, to boycott the Knesset. And as a result, we shortly afterwards saw that Israel did indeed return fire, resulting in a number of deaths of Islamic Jihad militants, but also a great number of civilian deaths. This is an extreme right-wing government. And unfortunately, when Netanyahu, a member of the right, is the furthest left member of the coalition, you have members like the security minister calling the shots. And that's really a worrying thing right now.
Yeah, especially as you point out his record. You've talked about, attempts at a ceasefire. There have been repeated attempts to negotiate one through Egypt. They don't seem to be holding. They seem to be failing. What might calm this down?
That's a great question. I see that the Egyptian foreign minister, the Jordanian foreign minister, and indeed German and French foreign ministers did just meet in Berlin, and they called for a ceasefire. They called for an immediate cessation of the violence. The UN has done the same. The US, the National Security Advisor, Jake Sullivan, has been on the phone overnight with his counterpart in Israel. All parties are calling for a halt to the violence, but whether that actually holds remains to be seen.
Yeah. Do you get the sense with this particular episode, if we want to call it that, this recent spate of violence, is at risk of spiralling a little out of control? It seems the attack and counter rocket firing just seems to intensify as the days pass.
It does seem to intensify. I'm not sure what's going to happen next. I watch with concern, like so many others. I sincerely hope that it doesn't. I sincerely hope that the Australian government plays a role in mediating this and calling for a ceasefire and in calling for parties to return to negotiations for a two-state solution. But ultimately, we do just appear to be very far from that point right now, and that's really worrying.
Yeah, because when you talk of a two-state solution, I mean, this current government Israeli government seems very far away, even contemplating that in the future.
I think that's right. I mean, I think that in order to get to a two-state solution, we need the immediate halting of settlement expansion. We need the end of the occupation, and both of those things are being actively kind of egged on by these far-right ministers. We have, not just Itamar Ben-Gvir, but we have Bezalel Smotrich in the government, another person who has made a claim recently that Palestinians as a people don't exist. And so I think when there are far-right forces in the government like that, egging on settlement expansion, leading the settlement movement, and then serving in the ministries, we're not going to see an end to settlement expansion. And that's precisely why there's a role for governments like Australia's to play, governments like the United States to play. And I certainly hope that that will bring about some kind of solution.
Yeah. Michael, you know, it must be awful to also in Israel be under this constant rocket fire attack. What do you think people feel there at the moment? I know there's a lot of dissatisfaction with the Netanyahu government, obviously with the judicial reforms that are on the cards.
Yeah, I think, I mean, it must be truly terrifying, and my heart really goes out to people who are living under rocket fire. It's deeply worrying. I do think that people are starting to push back. We've seen mobilization against this Netanyahu government for a record 19 weeks. We've seen literally hundreds of thousands of people taking to the streets, and that's reflecting mass mobilizations that have really never been seen before. So I do think as you continue to watch Netanyahu plummet in the polls, you are seeing the Israeli civil society mobilizing. You are seeing everyday Israelis mobilizing against this government. And so I think that is the silver lining that we can take out of this, is that it's not going unnoticed, and people will continue to respond.
Michael, appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.